Oh boy, Kevin Durant's just requested a trade. There's not much more to talk about. This is going to be a very Brooklyn Nets heavy episode of Third and Five. Okay, gents. As I touched on just there, Kevin Durant's requested a trade. Kyrie Irving's probably going to follow him out the door. There's a lot happening in Brooklyn Nets world, and I'm joined three of us sitting here in Brooklyn wondering what's going to happen over the next few days. James Thwaites, Dave Rice, and myself, Simon Hampton. Gents, it's been a bit of a roller coaster afternoon.
It's been a roller coaster week. Like on last week's pod, I was out in Colorado sitting in a driveway. I'm now sitting in my apartment in Brooklyn. Watched the Avs win a Stanley Cup final. Game 6. 4-2 down in Tampa. We watched that game in a car park in somewhere in Nebraska on an iPad, which was a bit funny. So had that absolute high. Had some other weird stuff in sports go on. Deshaun Watson is obviously going through his court case right now, or his hearings, to see how long he's going to be suspended for. I'd say he's out for at least another season, if not potentially 2, as the new rumors coming around. And then obviously we've got this absolute nightmare situation today, with KD requesting a trade after everything that's gone on. And as I was driving, I texted you both yesterday or the day before saying, this is awesome. Like, Kyrie's finally opted in. We can just get on and win a ring. And now this chaos happens. So it's been a pretty shitty day.
Yeah. Well, we're going to obviously talk a truckload about that over this pod. But just before we get stuck into that, Dave, dad life, how's it going for you?
Yeah, it's going well. Getting more sleep than I probably was expecting, but me and you actually caught some live sport on the weekend.
That's right.
Touch on seeing the mighty Rooney. There's chants that kind of make you think Wayne Rooney's been supported, like Rooney for Rugby United New York. So they got the biscuits, which is all the chocolates. So that was good to see, and they were pretty dominant.
Good to see Neha get it as well, and all the Kiwi lads that are over here win that.
Yeah, I'm enjoying the social media footage where they're basically taking the trophy, which is like a big shield. Seems to be doing the trips around. This is my intention to do with my newborn. Is like I've seen all the sites, but now I can see them all. And for them, that their baby is this new big trophy. So
it's a weird shield, man. It's a really funny trophy.
Yeah, it's not like a Ramford Shield style like wooden. It's an odd looking thing.
Matte metal look.
Ironically, after what Thwaites asked Nicky last week, it does look breakable. Breakable. I feel like if Naholo just put over his knee, I reckon that would stand.
I'm surprised it's still in one piece.
I would like to see, like, out of that final, it was awesome to see Rugby New York win it. But one thing I realized, one, it was on a Saturday, but 2, it was on at 12 p.m. Eastern time. So they were playing Seattle. So it was like 9 o'clock for any fan in Seattle or on the West Coast. And apparently they had their viewership numbers down from last year. And it feels like that obviously played into it a little bit, which is a little unfortunate. Then probably all the drama that went on with the Gilchrist teams as well, LA and Austin.
It's a good show. Like, I was trying to work out why it was that time. I mean, from going to the game, especially as a sort of new father, it was perfect, like time to go. But yeah, it was an odd one. I was trying to think, is it because they were hoping for some viewers in Europe, like rugby fans in Europe or South Africa even, like a more favourable time zone for that part of the world, sort of early evening. But definite strange choice.
It was weird. Yeah, I think the league's got a little bit of stuff to work on, I think. Obviously, it's good. Like, it was a decent game of code, but certainly with those numbers, they'll and then also the salary cap stuff with the 2 Gilchrist teams that you mentioned, there's a few things to work on for next season. But let's rip straight into it, because we're all dying to get into it and talk about a team with a fair bit to work on over the next few days as well. So first topic to talk about with regards to the Brooklyn Nets and the KD saga is to just run through this quickly. KD's requested trades. He's almost certainly gone out of there. Kyrie's opted in for his player option, but he's probably going to follow him out the door. They've re-signed Nick Claxton and Patty Mills, which sort of indicates that they're still going to try and put together a competitive squad this year. But first of all, guys, 6 months ago, this team had James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving on it, and now it's about to have none of those guys. Who's to blame for this whole mess?
There's one person and one person only for this, and it's Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving is absolutely toxic and has destroyed this team. The unfortunate thing about this, like right now, James Harden looks like a genius for walking out and demanding that trade from the Nets earlier in the year, and forcing his way into the 76ers. It's almost like he saw the writing on the wall. Kyrie has obviously been only playing less than 50% of the games after the whole vaccination situation. He's had issues in the past where he just disappears and goes to parties and doesn't show up to games. And then acted at the very last game, in his postseason interview, acting like he was going to get together with management and decide where to direct this team. It's 100% Kyrie Irving's fault. The fact that he's only played, I think it was 23% of the games in the last 3 years with Kevin Durant is horrific. The return on investment is awful. They let him get away with too much, for sure. And maybe a little bit goes towards KD as well with that. The stuff that was coming out in the media in the last couple of days said KD was staying out of it. He's not going to get involved with the Kyrie Irving situation. It finally gets settled, and the fact that Brooklyn weren't willing to give him a max deal, and then he signs his player option, and then suddenly KD demands a trade today. So I don't know, stuff them all. I just feels like KD wanted to be a LeBron James type player, wanted to lead a team, wanted to try play GM. It all blew up in his face. He's clearly not a leader as well. So I don't know. We will get the largest trade deal in history for KD. He's on a 4-year deal. He's at 34. He's obviously very talented. I don't know what we get for Kyrie, but yeah, it all goes on Kyrie for me.
So I've got it's hard in terms of if you're pointing the most of the blame, it's hard to go past Kyrie. However, I do have an alternative person that I feel like could shoulder some of this, and that would be Nash. And
no,
hear me out.
I will hear you out, but I'm immediately telling you and everyone that's listening, Dave Rice is wrong. So, but let's hear it.
Here's my theory. Here's my theory on Nash: is this could have played a part in Durant not being hugely happy. We've spoken numerous times, throughout this pod during the season, about what we perceive, and we're by no means experts, but what we perceive is not great coaching from Nash.
Hey, we have our own pod. We're experts.
We're experts, bro.
Yeah.
We're experts.
But anyway, but what I'm saying is we're just sort of armchair critics. We've never played the game at a high level to be able to but we can see him making poor decisions with challenges, poor decisions with timeout, particularly not calling timeouts when he should be to try stop momentum, real basic stuff. Now, he's a sort of a new coach as well, so it was a pretty bold call to begin with to have him kind of coaching the super team, right? Hear me out again. And now, probably his biggest challenge and a team like that, it'll be the same with the Lakers. It's about man management and sort of managing those egos. And I don't think he's succeeded in that. And obviously it's a massive challenge with someone like Kyrie, but I do wonder whether Durant's just yes, he's skipped out of it, but he's I don't think he's probably liked enough of what he's seen. And he's well, I'm going to go somewhere else. As a result.
I don't buy into any of that. The reasons why I don't buy into it though, Dave, KD wanted Nash there. That's the only reason Steve Nash is there. KD wanted him there in the first place. And two, I think he's the second highest paid or third highest paid coach because he has to put up with the bullshit that comes with it, which is Kyrie sitting there being we don't even need a this is 100%.
Also, he said that on KD's podcast as well. So they both thought that there's reports that after Steve Nash's training sessions were done, Kyrie would take players out for a second training session that he would run. Steve Nash was in a tough spot there. I just think I agree with Thwaites' earlier point that the players, namely Kyrie and KD, just had way too much power in that organization. And I get that your star players have power in these NBA teams, but they have way too much power. And Kyrie's clearly a guy as well that probably you don't want to be giving too much power to because he's so unpredictable.
Well, the other thing with all of this is and why I don't kind of like buy too much into this Nash theory is because if you're like superstar player who you're trying to build a franchise with goes up and says to the GM or the owner, this isn't working with this coach. We can win a championship. We need a new coaching staff. Who do you think they're going to get rid of? The $200 million player or the fucking $8 million a year coach? Like, the coach is gone. I just think you needed a special kind of personality to try and manage those things. And honestly, what it comes down to me is KD is clearly not a leader. Like I said before, he can't lead a team. He is a fantastic basketball player, but he's not a leader for those younger guys. And, unfortunately, Kyrie and just the toxic shit that's around him.
And the good thing about, I guess, that will hopefully, from a Nets fan point of view, disprove quickly what I said. We should probably get to see, like Nash is going to get, as you said, they're probably going to see a decent side put together here. And so not having that sort of toxic, unless they bring back Harden or someone else that's just as toxic, but like not having that, it's going to be a good chance to see Nash working with a bunch of guys that are actually buy in and aren't difficult. That'll going to be a good test for him to see, how he can go with a squad like that.
Well, there's no guarantee Kyrie gets traded here. I think KD's a lock to get traded, but Kyrie's a trickier trade, I think, to put out there. But we can talk a bit more about that shortly. But I think we all agree here that Kyrie is in the crosshairs as far as blame goes, and for the majority of it.
100%. Honestly, the aspirations and Brooklyn Nets championship hopes are dead at Kyrie Irving's feet for sure.
When did Kyrie get signed?
The year
3 years ago.
3 years ago. Durant missed the first year because he's recovering from the Achilles injury.
Yeah, I mean the pandemic wasn't known at that time.
But fuck, you would assume somebody like makes a rational decision and like doesn't hamstring his entire fucking team.
Do you also remember when he missed like 8 games to attend like his niece's birthday or something like that?
And he didn't attend the fucking when the Nets were in the bubble. He refused to go in the bubble.
Yeah. You just can't rely on this guy.
Well, the irony is there's going to be a lot of Nets jerseys around that are going to have number 11, number 7, and number 13.
There's one in my closet.
Kyrie and KD. That I mean, Brooklyn's kind of gets taken the piss that it's not as followed or as popular as as your New York Knicks or the Celtics, but there's a fair few singlets you see around, certainly our hoods. So they're all going to be soon to be former player jerseys.
The discount bins. All right. Well, with the blame established, let's move on to what's next. And like I personally, I'm like obviously gutted that this is working out like this. KD was a phenomenal player, and it was pretty cool to have like a top 15 NBA player of all time playing every week down the road. But I'm kind of excited to see what this team comes out with next season now, having sort of digested this, because it seems like they're going to try and compete. It seems like they're going to try and get some proper players back for KD, and it's not just going to be a draft pick heavy haul. So where do you guys see this team going from here?
Well, I just want to say first, this whole situation is an absolute fucking disaster. There is no way to sugarcoat this. The fact that we had a team, like you said, earlier, 6 months ago, or whenever it was, with Harden, Durant, and Kyrie Irving, and we're now in a position not that long after where none of them are on the team. It's an absolute disaster. There's no way to sugarcoat it. I do think, though, that at this point, like I said earlier, trading KD, because he's on a 4-year, $198 million contract, or whatever it is. He's 34. He's still averaging just shy of, 30 points a game. What the Nets should get for him will be massive. And in my head, it's, doing what's best for the organization. They obviously knew the risks with not maxing out Kyrie Irving and the fact that, they could lose KD or KD could request a trade out of that. So that's the situation they're in. They're probably looking to teams. There's obviously been rumors coming out today. The Phoenix Suns were up there, but also the Nets don't really need Aiden. So that's kind of semi off the table.
Lakers
Lakers always
Claxton as well now.
Yeah, and then like obviously here the Lakers, I don't see a scenario where the Lakers works. They just don't have enough assets to give up for KD. They maybe have the asset, maybe for Kyrie Irving, which is just Russell Westbrook to Brooklyn. Russell Westbrook's paid, I think, $13 million more than Kyrie Irving. But I don't know if they've got the picks to pair up with it.
No, they don't. I mean, that's the problem. And we're going to talk about the KD trade scenarios shortly. But like, that's the problem with the Lakers, because a lot of the reporting is, there was even reporting that the Lakers would try and get both KD and Kyrie. But I just don't see any way that's going to work, because those two are two positive assets, and Russell Westbrook's a negative at this point. So you have to compensate for him. But I think one thing I will say is that it's worked out very well for Sean Marks getting Kyrie to opt into this player option, because I think the 1 year of Kyrie is probably the most tradable contract that they could have got, and it's the best way to get some value back for him. Because if they'd signed him to a longer term contract, I don't think he's that attractive because of his unreliability, and obviously he could have opted out and gone as a free agent on a cheap deal to the Lakers or something, and they would have got nothing. So I think there's a pathway for the Nets here I don't think it's going to be the chance at a title that we all dreamed of, the super team and the big three, but I do think there's a pathway to be a, fifth or sixth seed in the Eastern Conference if they can, get Ben Simmons back on the court at point guard and have Joe Harris and a bunch of other pieces around Durant and Irving. I think there's a real pathway to be quite a good side still here.
Yeah, I think there is too. And, like for me in my head, obviously these are like dream scenarios at the moment. We'll find out over the next, few days or week where KD ends up. But it's like you bring in a Jimmy Butler, you bring in, a Jalen Brown.
I wouldn't go near Jimmy Butler. I think Sean Marks wants the least drama possible.
Yeah, but even with Jimmy Butler on the team, I don't think it's a drop in the bucket compared to the drama that comes with Kyrie Irving. But like you need you've obviously got Harris who can shoot, you got Seth Curry who can shoot. So getting a Jalen Brown and Patty Mills, getting, a Jimmy Butler or someone that, is a bit bigger, has a bit more weight behind them, can do those mid-range shots. I think will slot in nicely. Like you said, the Nets aren't going to be this automatic number one seed lock, but they can be what the Miami Heat were this year, which is they've got some excellent players on their team. No true superstar or kind of fringe superstar with Butler, maybe.
And the Miami Heat weren't they top seed?
Yeah.
I think one thing, and this is slightly off topic about what's next, but I do think this and the Lakers season that they've just had is probably signaling the end of this sort of era of teams trying to put together three superstars and then just work out the rest after that.
Yeah, it just sucks up too much cap, and like
too
injuries
risky,
are obviously
and then you're just like at the mercy of those superstars basically, and when they want out, your whole franchise is stuffed.
And as a fan, I think that's good, because what it's going to do is it's going to probably be a composite of, drafting well and bringing good players in as well, paired with, obviously having a star or two, and then also maybe filling the gap, taking the Warriors, that's getting Wiggins, plugging, what's missing for their team, and then they drafted really well, on top of obviously having their core players. So it's like they're a good example of kind of that mixture.
The teams with the smarter front offices are going to have more success. Like you look at the Phoenix Suns, and they've made, a lot of their teams homegrown. They made a smart trade for Chris Paul, but they also own all their draft picks for the next 5 years as well. Whereas the Nets had to give up their whole draft to Houston to bring in James Harden. And so, Phoenix are in a fantastic position now. They may give up their whole draft to future draft picks for Durant.
Is there any talk? So obviously, I mean, the rumors seem to be Suns and the Heat. What are the other sort of teams that are in the mix here? Would the Pelicans be in the mix?
All right. So move on to the third topic, KD trade scenarios. No, it's good.
Yeah.
But so the Heat and the Suns are the two ones that have been known as KD's preferred trade destinations. I'm in the camp where I just say fuck KD. Like you're walking out on us. We're getting the best. We're getting the best deal for us and our fan base.
OKC.
Yeah.
OKC.
I think the Pelicans could be one that have been building it around Zion and going from there. They could be up there.
Would you get Zion and Ingram? Could we
Nah.
Nah, I don't
See,
think so. Because the risk is they're not good. Like these teams are probably not going to want to trade for KD to just then have nothing around KD.
Yeah. And one of the things I saw today was basically like KD to the Pelicans. In return, the Nets get Ingram, Larry Nance, and then 4 first-round picks from the Pelicans. So that's kind of what you're looking at. I mean, like, there are a couple of teams out there as well. They can obviously go to the Suns, but I just don't see that happening. The other one's kind of the Nuggets, but I don't think that can obviously happen with
what about the Blazers
Junior being there.
I quite like him going them getting in touch with Cleveland and going after Evan Mobley or even Garland and building something. The Cleveland have got so many young, controllable players there that are going to be of huge interest to Brooklyn. And then a bunch of draft picks as well. So I could see them trying to build something around Cleveland, and that'd be Cleveland's way of sort of taking the next step up into being a true title contender. Maybe even Toronto.
I like that.
Toronto, Scotty Barnes as the headliner. I reckon the play for the Nets is to try and get like the top, young, early 20s player around the league and get, try and get younger. And
yeah. It's interesting as well because, like, obviously Boston's there as well. I 100% like where you're going with that side because it's true. You do want that young emerging talent, and I would love if we somehow got Mobley and Allen back.
Oh, Allen. Yeah, I don't think they're going to get Mobley and Garland, but it might be something like Mobley and Allen. Allen would be brilliant.
Yeah, bring them back.
Bring the old boys back. Get
LeVert. Get Dinwiddie out of Dallas. Dinwiddie from Irving, maybe.
The other one that's kind of sitting out there in my head is Boston. I don't know how realistic this is or not. Jalen Brown, there's obviously been rumors going around for the last few weeks that he's not super happy. So KD and Tatum get on really well. And basically with all these teams or all these players and match up, one of the common things that always comes out of this is look to Team USA. Who plays well together on Team USA? Because you can almost safely guess that they're going to link up at some point, and those two got on very well, obviously there. But a couple, I don't see him going to Portland. I don't think Lakers can obviously pull it off with the amount of picks and the drama with Westbrook that I've got. And then like you look to teams where it's like Orlando or OKC, and they're just too young and don't really have that established superstar power yet. Or
we wouldn't take it unless there was some weird 3-team deal that. Yeah, we wouldn't be going to those fringe sides.
Do you think the Kevin Durant burner Twitter accounts could handle him going to a team like Boston and going again to a team that knocked him out of the playoffs the season prior?
Honestly, like, I'm going to go back and like kind of give you something. I think if he does go there, it does hurt his legacy a bit. I think like depending on where he goes, it does probably impact his legacy a bit. He's obviously a fantastic player. He's definitely cemented himself, like probably in the top 10, top 15 players of all time, easily. It's just depending where he goes, he either ratchets up a few or goes down a few, I think, in my head. Just to see, because you don't want somebody going straight away somewhere to just win a championship. How hilarious would it be, though? Wouldn't be hilarious.
Actually, no.
I would hate it. If he went to the 76 with Joel Embiid, it's just instant championships. It's obviously not going to happen, but
that'd be pretty fun.
Yeah. So what you're saying, Si, it wasn't just that you went to the team that beat you, but it's also going to the team that lost the finals as well, right?
True.
Because he went to the Warriors after they had lost to the
Cavs. They went to the finals, lost to the Cavs that year. Yeah.
And then went, and he'll be going to the Celtics after they just lost.
I think the Celtics are they've kind of seemed like they're building a young core, and it's a real.
It would be. I
don't think they want to blow it up for a 34-year-old at this point. As good as Kevin Durant's Kevin Durant, but
to be honest, he is what that team needs, though. Like, imagine like him shooting, mid shots with Tatum driving towards the basket, the bucket.
That's a good point because I think what Durant does would make Tatum more dangerous because it will free him up. And I'm not sold on Tatum being like the leader, the best player that's just going to like absolutely dominate. I think he's got his deficiencies. The consistency is the main one.
He's also 24 though.
Yeah, for sure. But
like we said last week, he's not that guy yet. He potentially could still become that guy, but he's not that guy yet.
And KD unlocks him.
Yeah, and KD is going to be that guy that works well with Joel Embiid, Giannis, just those big, tough, brutal guys that can really drive towards the net because they pull in so many guys that, and obviously that Nets team, that's what they missed when you look at their playoff run and their season last year, which is just this big bruiser that can just drive the ball to the net. So, if he can, he's obviously not going to team up with Giannis. He's obviously, most likely not going to team up with Joel Embiid, but, those are kind of the style of players he would work really well with.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. I saw some report that the starting point was the AD trade to the Lakers, and that was probably the biggest trade haul in I think recent NBA history. So it's going to be a historic haul for the Nets, or it should be. So it's certainly going to be interesting to follow. But let's just take a look around the rest of the NBA now, because there's been a few other big moves. First of all, cross town at the Knicks, Jalen Brunson's going to take, I think it's about 110 million over 4 years to shift out of Dallas and head to Madison Square Garden in the bright lights of New York. Jalen Brunson, lovely player, very, very good player, but 110 million.
I think, and the Knicks are probably one of the few teams that aren't even being talked about with KD, and it's because they've gone all in on Brunson.
Brunson over KD, I love it.
It's a very New York Knicks thing to do.
It's crazy. I as I say, I think Brunson's a very good complementary player, but making him sort of your guy is a huge call from the Knicks, and it feels like this just resigns the Knicks to sort of being what they've been of late, which is anytime they show a little bit of promise, they can't get any higher than sort of the 8th, 9th, 10th seed, and so they'll sort of be playing to maybe sneak into the play-in tournament.
Yeah, that's what it feels like it is. To kind of explain where the gap was, though, Knicks offered of it, so they hired his dad about 2 months ago, I think it was, Brunson's dad.
A former NBA player, right?
Yeah, which feels a bit weird to try and entice him down, but the Knicks contract is basically 110. I think it's 106 or something plus incentives or something like that over 4 years. The Mavs apparently were offering 106 million over 5. So there's a bit of a big difference there. I think the Mavs are doing the right thing with that contract. I think it's the perfect kind of contract for someone like Brunson, but Knicks just overpaid, as they do with all their players. You got RJ
they overpaid
Barrett
Randall. They paid the year before. They after Randall had a great year, and it's the same thing with Brunson. Brunson played his best season without a doubt, and he's got paid. Randall the year before had an unbelievable season, took the Knicks to the playoffs, and led them, and then he was kind of missing most of the season, just gone. So the Knicks have put themselves in a bit of a hole here.
I do want to see what happens. Speaking of that Knicks team, they obviously traded Kemba Walker to the Pistons, and then are working out on a buyout of his contract. So it'll be interesting to see where Kemba Walker ends up. I obviously love him on the Nets now at this point, considering how terrible
he's
we potentially be.
He'd be a good, sort of vet, I guess, like a Derrick Rose, just one of those vets that come off the bench and, I can't give you too many minutes, but what they give you, is going to be productive.
Yeah. And then obviously Beal has opted out of his player option and signed a supermax in Washington for the Wizards, which is awful. That's just going to cripple that organization for a long time.
It's not looking good. It's funny to think Bradley Beal's getting the same contract as Nikola Jokic in Denver, but the one in Denver looks a lot more solid than Beal's in Washington.
Yeah, and kind of to put this in comparison, him and James Harden were had similar numbers last season. And Harden obviously was averaging about 4 more assists, I think, than Beal. So it's just crazy money to put out.
Again, Beal's a fantastic player, but that's
correct.
For $50 million a year, though. The big one is Dejounte Murray going from the Spurs to the Hawks in a big trade. The Hawks giving up, I think, 3 or 4 draft picks, and Danilo Gallinari, who's since been, I think, released by the Spurs. So Trae Young and Murray in the backcourt for the Hawks sort of elevates them a little bit in the East. The Eastern Conference this year is going to be a bit of fun.
Yeah, that team as well is going to be a lot of fun to watch. I'm really excited about the Hawks. Like, it's obviously hard reflecting on all of this because it's been such a letdown with the Nets, but there's so much exciting stuff happening still around the NBA. For some of these teams that are, hey, and the Hawks is one of them. Like, they just feel like a pretty fun team to watch. I think they obviously they traded out Cam Reddish, to the Knicks, back just after the All-Star break. So it's nice to see them, actually building around Trae Young and giving him what he needs to succeed.
Yeah.
And what about the PJ Tucker? Has he gone to the 76ers, did you say? Someone?
Well, I think he went to the 76ers, but there was a text I got earlier in the day that said he only had a 1% chance of going there. So I'm not sure if
I hate
that's not reliable.
I hate you, son. So at that time, we didn't know about KD. And I was like, well, he's obviously going to sign with the Nets to play with KD. But I'm kind of glad anyway, because 76ers
he's got a big contract.
How old is he? Can you look that up? So
37, I think it is. Maybe.
Yeah, so we got a 3-year, fully guaranteed $33 million deal.
Yeah.
He's a sort of a player that I think every team wants, just that sort of rough-nosed guy. We've spoken a few times about it, but that's a crazy contract. There's been some crazy contracts this week.
How much do they give him? Like, because sometimes these teams go longer contracts because, like, the annual salary lowers, and so then the salary cap hit is not as big. So I wonder if it's like, and then they plan to release him at the end anyway, and just take the $11 million or $10 million hit. And so obviously they're going to negotiate with Harden in the next couple of days to work out his next contract. And there was talks
that he was going to, like, basically kind of be willing. Well, was the implication that he would take a little bit less?
Harden, yeah, that he was going to be a little bit. He wasn't looking for the full max, so.
Which, when you're at that money, like, and you're in a team in that environment, it's the right thing for him to do. It's just I didn't think he had it in him, in terms of just sort of looking around, saying we've actually got with Embiid, with these other young guys coming through, like, we've got a squad here, like, but if I take the max, we're not going to be able to plug the gaps that we need, especially because they don't have the depth. So getting someone like a Tucker adds to the depth hugely, and they probably need a couple more players that.
Yeah, and then they'll be able to pick up a couple of guys on the veterans minimum, and get a couple of guys that way. So, I still don't know, because I still think building your team around James Harden at this point is James Harden and Embiid. Embiid's fantastic, but I still can't see them being a championship contender out of the East.
Not as the East is getting stronger and stronger. They're going to have to get through some pretty strong teams throughout the playoffs. Everyone in the East is
correct. They'll be there or thereabouts, but I still don't think they're anything better than they were this year, which is somewhere in that 3rd to 5th seed.
Yeah. They do seem like they're kind of like a player, or a strong player away from being that contender.
If they could move Tobias Harris, and he's on like $35 million, and get a player that was more worth that salary.
Yep.
On that team, they would be right there or thereabouts. But Tobias Harris is no good. So that's the sort of contract that's probably holding them back a bit. But
the other one we haven't really talked about is our old friend that has gone to the Clippers.
John Wall. Yeah, the Clippers could be an interesting one to watch.
Who's that?
Sounds like anyone.
John Wall gone to the Clippers. Clippers are super crazy. Like, Kawhi is obviously going to be back. Paul George is there. Now they got John Wall.
This is also sorry, throats to cut you off. But this is also one of those things where you're like, John Wall, like his name's been kind of ridiculed because of his terrible contract. That you forget that actually at $6 million this season, it's a very good deal, and he's still a very good player. It's just he's not a very good player at 47. It's like I'd take Russell Westbrook at $6 million. Yeah, just wouldn't take him at 47 million. So the Clippers, they'll be in great shape if Kawhi and PG.
It's all about how like it is for a lot of teams. Like, you know, you've got Kawhi coming off a big injury. You've got Paul George, who seemed to be injured a couple of times throughout the season. Like,
100%. And the best ability is availability. And 100%. And that's obviously what let the Nets down as well, with Kyrie not being available a lot. So you're 100% right, Dave. And it's like $6 million, absolutely you want John Wall. And, you know, like Zubac, I think his name is, the center that's there, is fantastic. So they're going to be a lot of fun to watch. That West is pretty stacked.
I went to the Clippers Suns, which obviously was without Kawhi and George, and they had some good players, man. Like the guys that are like, I think there were a few European like players, and or Eastern European names, and they were decent. And so by all means, assuming they've kept most of them, like they've got a really strong squad.
The West is going to be like, everyone's like talking about the East, but the West, you know, suddenly you've got the Clippers back up there. Fuck knows what's going to happen with the Lakers, you know, but you got the Clippers back up there. The Nuggets are going to have Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray back, both healthy, with Jokic, which is going to be scary as hell. Then you've still got the Warriors, who are going to be competing at a high level for a long, long time.
Still got Luka another year older with the Mavs.
Luka another year older. It'll be interesting to see who they bring in there, but like the West is scary as shit. Like
Portland's going to be a lot better as well. And obviously the big names still out there are going to be KD and Kyrie, and where they end up, and if they elevate one of these teams. The other ones to watch as well are Utah, because there's been a lot of chat already that Donovan Mitchell or Rudy Gobert could leave. So, you know, one of those
rumors already about the Heat putting an offer for Mitchell.
Gone for Mitchell. Yep. So, you know, there's plenty of movement, but we're going to have some pretty competitive teams, I think. But this also like speaks to the earlier point about the super teams not being so much of a thing, is that the stars are a little bit more evenly spread out now, and teams build.
Yeah, and actually, I think from what we just talked about, to sort of summarize it, like it's actually quite exciting. There's so many teams that are actually. It's exciting to see where they're going to end up, or how promising they look into the season ahead. So, and that's, you know, across a lot of the teams, which is good, because you don't want it to just be two teams, you know, duking it out. Like you do want this, unpredictability of who's going to win and who's going to kind of.
I wouldn't mind if it's two teams, as long as one of them was the Brooklyn Nets.
True.
Yeah, it's just kind of one final thing before we move on. It also makes me laugh that the two teams that probably have the best trade packages for KD are probably OKC and Golden State Warriors.
True. Who would you trade from Golden State? It'd be like Paul, Wiggins.
Well, you probably couldn't put Wiggins in because of we've got Simmons, and you're only allowed to trade one with that rookie max extension. But I mean, in an ideal world, hell yeah, let's bring in Andrew Wiggins, let's bring in Paul. They probably need to offload one of their centers as well. But obviously, it can't happen.
It's not happening. And the OKC story would be brilliant, but not happening as well. Maybe he'll take a year off and then go to the Seattle expansion team.
Brooklyn should just go all in and make the Australian superstars. Trade KD to OKC, get Giddy. Trade with Utah, get bloody what's his name?
Is Joe Ingles an Australian?
Yeah.
Yeah, Joe Ingles.
He's at Utah.
Yeah, he signed for the Bucks today. Actually.
Do you reckon they'll do that because they know that Patty Mills always plays lights out for Australia? So they're thinking the way that we can get him to be lights out every game is if we just put Bombers. Is it Australian Bombers? Is that their name?
Boomers.
They'll bring
back Matthew Dellavedova. It'll be a good time. Whoever their coaches, they'll sign him. Fire Nash.
Yeah. What about Durant maybe going to Vegas? A LeBron James owned Las Vegas.
It'll be LeBron, Bronny, and KD.
The other curveball that's in here, though, that would kind of make me super happy, because Kyrie's obviously trying to force his way to the Lakers. If he forces his way to the Lakers, the Nets get some kind of good return for him, because like getting Westbrook obviously is not a good return for Kyrie, considering the price difference. But I really hope he does all that, and then LeBron James walks in unrestricted free agency next year and just goes to somewhere like Cleveland and just leaves him on that team with like a injury-prone AD.
Yeah, I just hope that wherever Kyrie goes, that it doesn't work out too well.
3 teams he's burnt the Cavs, obviously not welcome in Cleveland anymore. Burnt the Celtics, obviously not welcome in Celtics anymore.
He's also just gone back on his word on both occasions as well. Everyone's like, he's
3 times
in
now.
Boston. Oh no,
3 times. He did the same with the Cavs.
I'm staying. I can't leave a man 7 behind. Oh,
Yeah, get fucked, Kyrie.
Anyway, final topic of the night, Mount Rushmore. So for tonight's Mount Rushmore, we're going to do Mount Rushmore of letdowns, which is perfect and was not at all planned. But I think number one we'll all be in agreement on that it's the Brooklyn Nets of the past 2 years.
Absolutely, 100%. Bringing in 3 superstars like that of that caliber, you would expect a championship, or at least in like the finals or Eastern Conference finals. And over that, they didn't make it. They obviously had the first year where KD was injured, which is fine. And they went into the bubble. Kyrie didn't turn up to the bubble. Year 2, obviously knocked out in that brutal game 7 with KD and his big toe against the Bucks and Giannis. And then, this fucking absolute aging of a season that we've just gone through with COVID and the vaccination status and all that stuff. So,
yeah. So that's a lot. But what other letdowns where, teams have overpromised, underdelivered, players have overpromised, underdelivered, doesn't have to be a team. Who would you have out there? Any closer to home back in New Zealand?
I would probably say the New Zealand Warriors. The hopes are always high going into seasons with the Warriors. You expect so much, and then suddenly it's the battle for the wooden spoon. Players walking away, or Aussie players walking away, saying that they don't want to be, away from home. They don't want to be in Auckland or in New Zealand. And just it all coming crashing down. It's always been a letdown for me, because you do want to see the Warriors succeed and get up there, and it's good for New Zealand. You want Lee to succeed in New Zealand, but it's just constantly hitting those hurdles, unfortunately, there.
Yeah, I think the Warriors, of more recent, probably haven't had quite the squad that you would expect them to go too deep. But there was a period of time, not that long ago, where probably season after season, it was kind of like, it's our year. And maybe there was an element of just patriotism and, we were being a bit ambitious. But you sometimes, when I was living in Aussie, you watch the sort of the league shows, on the Sunday Arvo and the footy show. And I think it boggled some of their minds, the analysts, just why aren't they better than they are? They should be good. And because the Kiwis would often be really strong and would either sometimes beat Australia or at least go very close. And it's just can't put it together. And, on paper, the team would often be so strong. But so I don't know if it's a specific seasons team or if it's just the New Zealand Warriors
just
from 95 to date.
What is it, 2 grand finals and no titles, I think, in about 25
95
years.
was first year.
95, so 27 years.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good candidate.
Bloody brutal too. But honestly, hope the Warriors get up. I hope they can actually be a great, because I love watching the Warriors play. It's obviously a bit harder over here to catch it with the time difference, but they're always a fun team to root for when they're winning. They're just being a bit brutal.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've sort of spoken offline. I think it's probably, given New Zealand, it's probably appropriate to have, there's been plenty of letdowns come World Cup time for All Blacks. So, my view, I think we've sort of spoken about this, but my view would probably be the 07 would be the biggest letdown. That was our earliest exit in the quarterfinal against France. It was France hosting the World Cup, but we got knocked out in Cardiff. but I think that to me would be, that would be a decent candidate. There's obviously been a few other underperforming World Cup campaigns, but that would be the worst if I was to rank them.
All Blacks in Cardiff, not 99.
Yeah, I defend the 99. I think that was against just a French team that I think would have put 40, 50 points on any team that day. Just one of those like freakish incidents. We were up by 20 at halftime. We got beaten by over 10. Just crazy that you see highlights of the tries. They were just, chip chases that were, freakish bounces that you get off a rugby ball that kind of went straight into their hands. And I think the team was just absolutely shell-shocked. So, yeah, I don't think, yes, they probably definitely should have won, but I don't think our 99 squad was that great. And yeah, I kind of compare it to the 2019 semi-final loss to England, where on that day we were just not the best team. Like, we were beaten by the better team, and I don't think you can, complain too much about it when that happens in any sport.
Here's a bit of a curveball for you both. I felt like it was a letdown at the time. Do you remember the David Tua Shane Cameron fight back in 2009? And it was on like a pay-per-view thing.
Fight of the century.
Fight of the century, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. This is a bit of a throwback. I just remember it being pretty boring. I think I had to look up what actually happened because it felt like pretty unmemorable.
It became a meme. It became a meme because of that. There was that Nick Minute guy, and they did that little like meme where it would be like Shane Cameron just absolutely, because he was obviously quite a good talker and just like ripping into Tua, who has been very humble and silent in the pre-match, and then there'll be that Nick Minute guy, and then it'll just be like Tua absolutely unloading on him.
Yeah, knocked him out at 7 seconds into the second round. That was a letdown for me. I expected a lot more out of that fight. I should have known better as well, because David Tua is obviously a fantastic boxer. But yeah, that was a pretty big letdown. I remember it being real expensive as well on pay-per-view.
I actually remember watching it at the Temperance Bar. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
that 3-story bar. It was absolutely humming. On the flip side of that is actually the Tua Lewis fight.
Yeah, I was thinking about that one as well. 2002, was it? Or 2000, maybe?
So ironic to have Tua on both ones, on complete different ends of the result. But yeah, I mean, it's obviously quite hard to kind of truly remember the fight in detail, but it just, Tua, it's one of those things where you're the underdog, you've got to go after it, and you just never even got close, particularly when you're the sort of the heavyweight, the sort of the knockout sort of punch guy.
That reach, Lennox Lewis is just
for sure, and an incredibly skillful boxer, but that was just a letdown as well of itself, just because you're sort of pretty amped for a potential title, which would have been huge, would have made the Mt Rushmore for Kiwis in America. 81.
Absolutely. What about this the Cricket World Cup when we played at the MCG? Brendan McCullum, you reminded me, had an absolute shocker.
First time.
Yes. Third ball, duck.
The only reason I say it was a letdown is because we had that absolutely epic match against South Africa, I think it was, at Eden Park, which came down to that final over.
That was our World Cup as well. Grant Elliott.
Yeah, Harry, whatever his name was.
Harry Jeff.
Yeah, that's the one. It felt like the momentum was building. There were all those memes going around, and about how massive MCG was, and they were tweeting about it, and then it just felt like a bit of a letdown, to be honest.
Yeah, it'd be up there. That World Cup. We had so much momentum on our side because we played every game in New Zealand except the final.
Yeah,
and the whole country got behind us, and then we just fell apart in the final. And the next final 4 years later, we don't talk about. But any other American ones? Like any other terrible contracts or terrible letdowns?
I think there's probably
quite a lot
of NFL ones that you could probably talk about. Multiple Cowboys teams in there, I'm sure.
Just Dallas Cowboys since the mid-90s.
Yeah, I think
Really
like
obvious
if you're gonna talk about like a letdown as in like a disappointment from like a fan's point of view, is that Patriots team that went unbeaten in the regular season and then lost in the final. I think they went unbeaten, or maybe
They
they
did.
only
They
lost
did.
one.
They were the
Yeah,
first.
and then
Yeah.
they lost the
So,
Super Bowl that
was it-
year to the
Was it the
Giants.
Dolphins? Did the Dolphins go unbeaten as well? Was it the first team since the Dolphins in like the 80s or something, or 90s?
Correct, yeah,
And
but the Dolphins still popped the champagne because they obviously won the Super Bowl that year as well.
Yeah. And I think probably that's a real. I'm a big fan of that because they were such heavy favorites. I think the Giants, just having watched that Tom Brady doco, they kind of dissected like the Giants were an awful team. Sorry, going into like, I think they were lucky to make the playoffs, and then they just kind of one of those where you get in on a bit of a run, and you sort of underdog playing away every game, but you start to build momentum just by winning these close games that you're probably not expected to. And they were a very defense heavy side,
Correct.
which is probably
Yeah.
what kind of played a big part. What's his name?
And
Michael Strahan?
Strahan, yep. Obviously, sack leader up until I think last year, he was overtaken. But that for me would be a pretty big letdown because you sat there like, obviously it's hard at that time to support the Patriots too much, but all that momentum leading up to that final game, and then getting beaten by Eli Manning and that Giants team, who, like you said, weren't super exciting on offense. I'm pretty sure they had Victor Cruz at that point, who was kind of like their pretty star, in brackets wide receiver. But other than that, it was, bit of a letdown for me.
What's a way to also measure something like that is, I reckon, most people wouldn't. I mean, that was kind of early in the Patriots dynasty. It wasn't like that won 7 or whatever at that time, but so many people wouldn't want them to win. Whenever they're playing Super Bowls, most neutral fans would have been going for the other team just because you're sick of seeing them win. However, I feel like in a game like that, when they were unbeaten, because it's a chance at history, something you do not see very often, a lot of people on the fence might have gone their way. So that's where it would have been a letdown, because people that would have normally been really anti-Patriots probably would have not minded them winning this, not because they hated the Giants, but because it was a chance of witnessing history. So yeah, definitely letdown in that regard.
A couple of other ones when you think about kind of those letdowns, probably, an NBA team doing a three-peat. We obviously haven't seen that since the Bulls doing it twice in the 90s. The Golden State Warriors had a chance to do it, lost to Cleveland. I think the Heat had a chance to do it as well. And I think they either lost to I think it was the Mavs at that time. That's always a bit of a letdown. I don't think it makes it on Mount Rushmore for me.
Well, what's the fourth one? Because we got 3 logged in. So what are we settling in on for the fourth one?
What about wasn't there the America's Cup as well?
Yeah,
America's
Team
Cup
New Zealand
was a good
lost.
shout.
Oh, that was a letdown. Letdown. What happened? Talk me through it, because I just remember being super confident, and then everything coming crashing down real fast, and hope just draining away from me.
Well, we were up. I think it was like a best of 9 series, so best of 17. We're up 8-1, I think, or even maybe 8-0. And look, far and away the better team. 9th race, we're winning it, cruising to victory. But because the wind was so light that day, we actually took too long to get to the finish line. And so they cancelled the race and couldn't declare a winner. And then we didn't win another race after that. And Oracle and Jimmy Spittle, the Australian, won 9 straight races and won the America's Cup. And so we lost 9-8. And I remember like when we were 8-1 up or something, Spittle doing like a press conference and just going on like, imagine if these guys lost from here, like, and just building up the pressure. And we did lose.
It's crazy. What I find really interesting about sailing in general is that it's kind of close to F1 from the point of view of whoever has the best boat is always going to win, and almost like an F1, whoever has the best car is usually going to win on the day or come close unless something freak happens. And that's exactly what Oracle did that year, which was they made adjustments to their boat and then they just absolutely killed it from there on out. And you've seen it even with like recent America's Cup, where Team New Zealand have just engineered their boat to be far superior and just kill it all the time. And like these races aren't even close. But that, like getting so close and then having it taken away, was definitely a letdown.
Yeah. So the Nets, All Blacks 2007, the Warriors, Team New Zealand.
I think it's got to be Team New Zealand. I mean, like that Shane Cameron, David Tua fight, obviously the New England Patriots almost going on that completely unbeaten record. It's got to be there as well. Maybe part of me almost wants to take off the Warriors and put that Patriots one on there. I don't know. I think it's a little up for debate. They're all letdowns.
We'll put it on the social media and people can debate.
Yeah, we're stapling a A4 face onto our Mt Rushmore and putting 2 extra faces on because we're also indecisive after a tough day.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, that was a brutal week. That is a week I never want to do again with the Nets. Onwards and upwards, hopefully, though, I say very hesitantly. God, I hope we get something good for KD, but we'll see. I guess next week we'll know more.
We'll probably have a fair bit to talk about. Yeah, take care until next week.